Does anyone look at total people spend or total workforce spend? Total cost of workforce? A couple of you. Even if you don't do so now, it's a nice mental construct to have and start to socialize internally. Why? One of the most commonly used metrics, yet one of the least valuable at the end of the day, is revenue per employee. Why? Why? It's a productivity measure that's very common, but you can manipulate the denominator, right? If we want to look better, okay, revenue can be flat, let's just get rid of a few people and we look more productive, but you might take some of that savings and go and start contracting with a vendor to do some of that work. So how do we actually look at how much investment we're making to actually execute a particular strategy? We have to look holistically. In this example, we have full-time employees, we have consultants, so they're a high source of competitive advantage. Long-term horizon here, low competitive advantage. We have outsourcers, and we have short-time horizon, low competitive advantage. We have contractors, temps. So in 2007, 2008, what happened? We reduced full-time employees, didn't we? We expanded the use of consultants and contractors and temps and outsourcers. So in some cases, financially, we didn't change that much in terms of the spend that we were putting forth. We just changed the profile of the workforce. Okay. So again, this can be as much of a mental exercise as it can be a quantitative exercise. You have this data living somewhere in procurement or another location, depending on your organization. But again, to start thinking about this can only be healthy. So workforce plan, current state assessment, internal supply, future state visioning, the demand required, forecasting internal supply, forecasting external supply. So what is out there in the open market, some call it an environmental scan. How do you assess the gap? In other words, what are you going to do to fill a particular gap? Or if you have an oversupply, what jobs are you going to remove from the workforce? And finally, taking action and adjust. A crude example here is you have a current head count, you have a certain forecasted attrition. In this case, we went down to 80. Talent demand is 110, so we have a gap of 30. How are we going to fill that gap? And there's 4 of a workforce plan. Your internal development strategy, so to bring people up inside the organization, an external recruiting strategy, so acquiring that talent externally. You can redesign the organization, and a very simple example is increasing span of control and bringing in external help. So these are 4 actions that can happen out of a workforce plan. Make sense? Okay. Many, however, have workforce planning sitting where? In recruiting or talent acquisition exclusively. So it's not leveraging the value of that exercise, more of a recruiting validation exercise than it is truly a workforce planning exercise. In the interest of time, I'm going to accelerate through this, but one of the things that I'm increasingly passionate about is what are we measuring in the first place? Do we know the attributes of successful employees? And I use the term attributes intentionally. I do not use the word competencies. And what's in your handout is something called the Talent Assessment and Development Framework, which is a framework that aligns job design with recruiting, with internal development. It's a meta framework that brings all those formerly disparate activities together. And whether that resonates with you or something else, the key challenge is if we have a new role, do we have the processes and related data to search inside our organization for appropriate people? Oftentimes we don't. And if we don't know if we have somebody internally, what do? We go externally. Then we look at the external market or talent in the external market through yet a different lens. So we have all these different lenses. So what would it be like to look through a common lens both internally and externally? So whether it be that TAD framework or something else, we have to be smarter about what we're doing when we assess talent both internally and we'll audit labor pools externally. We'll ultimately have a development strategy. We'll forecast internal supply. We'll have a forecasted applicant pool. We can start envisioning the future of the work. Meanwhile, there's a business strategy associated budget, which is going to provide some constraints. There's going to be a certain talent demand to get the strategy done. There's going to be that gap, as depicted a couple slides ago, between the talent demand and the talent supply. And we can look at talent capacity and labor modeling and ultimately design the organization of the future. One of the things we're not very good at right now is identifying our individual and collective capacity.